All right, we're about to dive into one of the most notorious and honestly most influential books ever written, Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. Now, this is a book everyone thinks they know, but today we're going to peel back the layers to get to the radical and, yeah, often shocking ideas at its core.
You know, this famous line from the film The Third Man just sets the stage perfectly. It throws this deeply uncomfortable question right in our faces, a question Machiavelli himself was obsessed with. Is there a real link between chaos, cruelty, and greatness? Does peace just, breed mediocrity?
For 500 years, his name has basically been a synonym for political evil. I mean, think about it. If you call someone Machiavellian, you're saying they're a ruthless schemer, someone who will do absolutely anything to win. But what if that's only half the story? What if the man behind the myth was way more complex?
To really get the prince, you have to get the man first. And he wasn't some shadowy advisor, whispering evil thoughts into a king's ear. No, the real Machiavelli was a dedicated public servant, a diplomat, a patriot, who wrote his most famous work not from inside a palace, but from exile.
Look at this. For 14 years, Machiavelli was a serious player in Florentine politics. But when the powerful Medici family came roaring back and destroyed the republic he served, his life was turned upside down. He was thrown out, he was tortured, and he was banned from politics for life. And you have to understand, this context is everything. The Prince isn't some abstract academic essay. It's a book born from total failure, written by a man desperately trying to figure out the very nature of the power he had just lost.
And this quote, wow, it gives us such an incredible, personal glimpse into his life in exile. Every single night, he'd take off his dusty farm clothes, put on his best robes, and walk into his study to talk with the great thinkers of history. He wasn't just writing a book, he was desperately trying to understand his own time by arguing with the past.
And make no mistake, Machiavelli knew he was doing something totally revolutionary. He wasn't just handing out tips to a ruler. He saw himself as a kind of explorer, charting an entirely new continent of political thought and discovering what he called new modes and orders.
This comparison just shows you the sheer scale of his ambition. He really believed that just like Columbus found a new physical world, he was discovering a new political one. And in this new world, the rules weren't set by morality or by God, but by the cold, hard facts of human nature. And this right here, was his great break with pretty much everyone who came before him. For centuries, political philosophy was all about imagining these perfect worlds. Plato's Republic, Augustine's City of God. It was always about how people should live. Machiavelli just swept all of that aside. He said, I'm only interested in how people actually live, in the messy, violent, real world of power. This is basically his mission statement right here. Forget utopias. He wanted to get to the effectual truth, the truth of what actually works in the real world, whether we like it, whether we find it pleasant or not. This is the birth of what we now call political realism.
And here are the stakes. For Machiavelli, clinging to idealism wasn't just naive, it was deadly. A leader who acts based on how the world should be instead of how it is going to get destroyed. Simple as that. Survival, preservation, that's the first and most important goal. Okay, so if idealism leads to ruin, what's the alternative? You can't use the old moral rulebook to play this new, realistic game. You need a totally new kind of leader with a completely new set of skills, and Machiavelli is about to write their playbook.
And here's the thing. This book isn't really for a traditional king who just inherited the throne. No, his real audience is the new prince, the founder, the innovator, the person who seizes power through their own skill and their own guts. This is basically the first political blueprint for the self-made man.
So to succeed, this new prince needs a special quality that Machiavelli calls virtù. Now let's be crystal clear, this is not virtue as in being a good or moral person. Virtù is a mix of manliness, of skill, of audacity, of ruthlessness, and the ability to do what is necessary. Yeah, including cruel things to get what you want. It's about being effective, not about being righteous.
So how do you get this virtù? Well, Machiavelli uses this fantastic analogy. He says, an archer trying to hit a distant target has to aim way higher, because he knows gravity is going to pull the arrow down. In the same way, a prince has to imitate the greatest leaders in history, people like Moses or Romulus, aiming for their impossible greatness just so he can land somewhere close.
So this whole idea of imitating great founders, it leads him to one of his most famous and frankly most brutal distinctions.
He argues that all great founders are kind of like prophets, right? They bring new laws, new ways of life. But, he says, they come in two basic kinds. You have the armed prophets, like Moses. They conquer, they succeed, and then you have the unarmed prophets. They get destroyed. He'd seen this with his own eyes in Florence with a friar named Savonarola, who tried to reform the city with faith alone and ended up burned at the stake. The hard lesson? At the end of the day, new orders are built on force.
But wait a second. This raises a really fascinating question, doesn't it? What about Machiavelli himself? He doesn't have an army. He doesn't have any territory. He is an unarmed prophet trying to conquer the world not with a sword, but with a book. He knew that the sharpest ideas could be the most powerful weapons of all.
Okay, now for the ultimate masterclass in Machiavellian virtue. His number one example was a man he'd actually watched up close, the brilliant and utterly ruthless Cesare Borgia. And the story of what Borgia did in the province of Romagna is, well, it's the stuff of legend. So Borgia needs to control this chaotic territory. What does he do? First, he sends in this cruel but super effective deputy, Ramiro Dorco, to do all the dirty work. Cracking down, executing people, basically using fear to restore order. Naturally, the people start to hate Dorco's guts, but the region gets stable. And then comes the masterstroke. Borgia, wanting to seem like the good guy, has Dorco arrested and executed. And he doesn't just execute him. He has the man's body cut in half and put on display in the public square with a bloody knife next to it. Think about that. In one single move, Borgia gets the stability he needs, and he wins over the people by punishing the guy responsible for the cruelty. And the people were left, in Machiavelli's absolutely chilling words, satisfied and stupefied. That, right there, is the essence of virtue, using cruelty like a surgeon's scalpel to achieve a political goal. And this brings us right to the core paradox of his entire work. Machiavelli is arguing that the peaceful, orderly society we all say we want, the good, is often built on a foundation of terrible acts. He forces us to confront this deeply uncomfortable idea that the roots of a peaceful state are often fed by violence and cruelty.
So, we're left with the big question, the one that's haunted readers for 500 years. Was Machiavelli a teacher of evil? Was he writing a handbook for tyrants? Or was he a political scientist with the guts to just describe the world exactly as he saw it, giving us our first truly honest look at the brutal mechanics of power? That, I think, is for you to decide.